You saw the title and saw the thumbnail, so this is how I remade Azur Lane within JavaScript. Well, in order to do this, we need to lay some outlines on what the project needs to do. However, it was for a school final, so I already had that. But what part should we recreate? Well, there's the combat, even though most people put in auto. First, we need to add, well, player characters. And I'm not going to add the back fleet because that would be a little too much for 10 days. And, well, we'll need to be able to move and shoot. We will also need enemies that can move and shoot. So, those are some basic things that we need to accomplish. So I also plan to add an endless mode, which I have done. So, well, we'll get right into it. Alright, so let's talk about player movement. We're using JavaScript with a very specific library, Processing.js, because that's available on Khan Academy, which is where the program is built in. So key pressed and key released are functions that are already defined within the program, and they get, called whenever a key is pressed and released. So here at key pressed, well, it just says, okay, if the key is not already pressed, then it'll just add that key code to an array. If keys are released, then it just removes that key code. Now, upon the player movement handler, it just loops through, well, every key in that array and determines, okay, so if this value, which is the index, which this will loop through all indexes, is equal to 78. 87. That is the ASCII table key for W. The ASCII table is very important for keys and key codes because, well, that's how we translate it. If it's a W key, well, the Y value will move up, which is -2. S is down, so Y value is +2, and so on and so forth. Now, I did also, for some reason, put torpedo ready in here. Do not know why, and also, for some reason, I also put shelling timers. Well, no, wait, that isn't shelling timers, that is actually the player boundaries. Alright, so now let's also talk about, well, the special enemy movements, because, well, we're talking about movement. So here, as we can see, this here takes an index from an array. This is an object array, so it has multiple values within a value. So we have the X and Y value. Now, it'll take that X speed, it'll add the X value to the X speed. Or I should say X speed to the X value. And it does that same thing with the Y. This way it gives the enemies a sort of movement, you could say. And also, well, it has boundaries. So if the special enemy goes about beyond this value, which the enemy is, well, about, has a radius of 25. So it determines, okay, so it'll just bounce, like if it went to the edge of the screen, it'll just bounce right off the edge of the screen, pretty seamless. However, it needs to go in the opposite X direction. So it'll just pull a random value between -1 and -3. And, well, here's where some of the AI comes in. Basically, special enemy index.movement timer, every time this function gets called, it's about 60 times a second. So this way, that at 1 second, this here will equal 1. So if special enemy.movement timer is, well, pretty much just about 2, so every 2 seconds, movement timer will reset, and the X and Y speed will randomize their values. This way, it kind of, well, creates unpredictability. Alright, so let's talk about torpedoes and shells. The shell handler is just about a repeat of the torpedo handler, so we'll cover that first. Torpedoes were actually the first weapon introduced into this project. It takes a simple little input here called loop. If loop is false, then that means, okay, well, we're going to check the health of your characters, and if it's above 0, then, well, a torpedo gets added. If it's false, if it's true, then that means, well, it's just going to loop through everything and move them. And, of course, if torpedoes are off the screen, well, just remove them, save some processing power. And this here, well, also shows Okay, so if the torpedo timer is greater than 3, actually no, less than or equal to 3, then it's going to say, okay, the torpedo timer, let's add 1/60th of a second, because this program runs at 60 times a second. Alright, and then as we can see here, there's an if-else. So, well, yeah. And if, well, torpedo timer is greater than or equal to 3, then torpedo ready is equal to true. This means that you can launch some torpedoes. Now, I'm not going to get into launching of torpedoes because you can check that out for yourself in the project. Shell handler here is just about the same thing, except add, well, if add is true, then you add shells. If add is false, then that means you loop through all the player shells. Now, if add is special enemy add,
Gordon! Gordon! Wake up, Gordon! She's gone, Gordon! She's gone!
So we'll actually get into a bit of the launching shells for, well, the player real quick. Shelling timers. So shelling timers at certain intervals, it will launch shells. And then here, as we can see, shelling collisions. This here just loops through all enemy shells that, well, are currently on the field, and well, if there's collision detection. So if the players get too close to shells, well, that just means, well, you lose health. And here in the special enemy handler, there's also a little part in the standard enemy handler too. But shell collisions, as we can see, it just loops through all player shells and, well, splices them out and does damage for the special enemies and standard enemies when, well, they get hit. Shell launching as well. Special enemies will launch shells 2 times a second, so every half second. That's pretty much... Well, actually, I'll go ahead and show you for the standard enemy handler. Alright, so now that we have talked about, well, pretty much everything we need to have for gameplay, this here, endless mode, will kind of just combine all these functions into one. We'll move selected fleet into the player fleet handler, so we have that there. And, well, if at least one of your character's health is greater than 0, then, well, this will execute. We have our timers here. This way, it kind of just keeps the game running, so the levels will increase. This here will determine what spawns, and this here's how long you lived. Now we'll do spawn timers first. So spawn timer is about 2 seconds. It'll spawn in, well, some standard enemies, battleships, in which, well, the amount is dependent on what level you're at. Now it's about 5 seconds, well, that's when we add a special enemy. Now special enemies, well, depending on what you get, is determined on, well, a random number. And, well, if it's 7, that's where it kind of just caps out, so we'll add a bomber boat, and we'll reset the spawn timer. Now, combat functions, well, this here is just kind of everything, so shell handler, well, we're just going to track, and well, I also think this here is also track. Torpedo handler, well, this here is loop, so we're just going to loop that, so these 3 here will just track things. Player movement, standard enemy, and special enemy, well, that just kind of like goes through everything that we've kind of already discussed, so just loops. And, well, if level timer is greater than 15 seconds, level, we add 1 level to our level, and the timer resets. This way it can just keep on going. And here we have text for, well, health and whether or not torpedoes are ready, your time alive, and your level, just so you have a few stats you can base yourself on. And this here is actually a little bit buggy. But anyway, it's just supposed to color your health text. And here's the else statement. So if the conditions of here are not met anyway, so all your players are dead, well, we just reset every stat that we changed, and we'll change the screen number. You can figure out what screen numbers do later. But that's pretty much it. I have a clip of me getting the highest level possible, well, highest level so far that anyone of my knowledge has achieved. So I'll go ahead and show that. Womp womp. Level 13, we're at level 13, oh my goodness. Oh my god, I almost made it, Actually, let me get a screenshot of this. I need a screenshot. But anyways, yeah, my friend, when he got to level 13, it was just, this here still had some, numbers to it. So, the fact that I made it this far now puts me as the record holder. Like how I should be. I made the game. I should be the record holder. But anyways, yeah, that's all for today's video.